are crucial for Indian farmers, and Prime Minister Modi constantly raises this issue. Please increase the volume of deliveries. The issue is entirely different. It's not about rupees, it's about what those rupees can buy, respectively, for our companies. We're also thinking about this, not only the Indian government, but we also do. And we agree that this disparity must be addressed, but not through bans, rather by finding areas beneficial for both sides. Therefore, during my visit and at our initiative, there will be an exhibition showcasing our importers from India. I want to share with you something completely candidly. This was my direct instruction to the government of Russia, which is to consider what else we could purchase from India. We're considering this matter together, including from the perspective of the Russian Federation.
That's an incredible move if it goes forward. My next question to you, sir, before we move to other issues, is how do you balance, I'm going to ask that directly, how do you balance India and China? Because it is very clear that you're keen on good relations with both these countries. How do you balance them? Seeing some tensions between us.
We know this very well. India and China are our closest friends. We treasure that relationship deeply, and I do not believe we have the right to interfere in your bilateral relations. But I know that both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping are committed to finding solutions to all issues, even to the most complex interstate problems. I know about it because both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping see that some specific tension is rising, and they both try to find solutions to these issues, exerting maximum effort. I know this well, and I can see it clearly. And the key reason why they would succeed would be their wisdom, which we appreciate immensely. At the same time, Russia does not feel entitled to intervene, because these are your bilateral affairs.
И мы этому очень рады, но не считаем себя вправе как-то туда вмешиваться. Это двусторонние отношения.
The next important issue with regard to India, sir, is terrorism. We faced two major terror attacks, one in Pahalgaon and then one in Delhi. My question to you is that we see a dual ideology on terror in the world from different countries. What is the solution in your eyes? Because Russia has also faced terrorism. India faces it. What, in your eyes, is the solution to your terrorist, my freedom fighter ideology?
It's very simple. To achieve freedom, we must use lawful means only. Any actions involving criminal methods or those harming people cannot be supported. This has been decided long ago. As you have correctly noted, Russia has repeatedly faced acts of extreme terrorism throughout its recent history. In these matters, India is our full ally, and we completely support India's fight against terrorism.
Полный союзник и целиком и полностью поддерживаем Индию в борьбе с терроризмом.
Right. Okay. But there's another country in the neighborhood, very important to Russia, important to India, Afghanistan. You are a very rare country to have recognized the Taliban regime. What made you really look at that as a strategic interest to recognize the Taliban at a time when the world is still saying they have not given equal rights to women, where there are still a lot of issues with Afghanistan actually coming to becoming a country that holds women and men equally, and there are many other human rights issues there.
In every country there are enough problems, and Afghanistan is not an exception, considering that for decades this country has been embroiled in a civil war. It's just horrible. But the Taliban clearly controls the situation in Afghanistan, and this is evident. Here's what needs to be said first, and you have to accept it because it's reality. Secondly, what's important to note is that the Afghan government takes many actions to combat terrorism and various terrorist organizations, including ISIL and others like them. This we also know very well. Afghan authorities have significantly reduced opium production in their country and are actively addressing drug threats from within its borders. There are several other important issues here. The main point is that in order to influence events happening in the country, you must stay in contact with the current leadership there. Exactly what we are doing.
Предпринимает активные шаги по сокращению наркоугрозы с территории Афганистана. Есть и некоторые другие обстоятельства. И главное из них заключается в том, что для того, чтобы как-то влиять на происходящий процесс, нужно быть в контакте, нужно работать. Чем мы и занимаемся.
There's another flashpoint.
The foreign minister of Afghanistan was in India. I'm just sharing a snippet. He was in India, and we weren't allowed. Women weren't allowed to attend the press conference, and we fought back. And then he had to hold a press conference with women as part of that entire delegation. Isn't that interesting? I was just sharing it with you.
Да.
There is truth in what you say, but on the other hand, if he hadn't come here, you wouldn't have had any chance to influence these events at all. And now you've got both connections and the minister who has arrived. You were able to express your reaction to what happened. How do we measure whether that's little or much? It seems to me that at least this is the part of your influence and your partner's influence on the situation. But imagine there were no contacts at all. Then what? Everything remains exactly as before, and nobody, including yourself, would influence anything or express any opinion about this. In contrast, now such an opportunity is available to you. Contacts are better than no contacts at all.
Pushing for change is equally important, as you make a very valid point. The other flashpoint is Gaza. And it is now being known that you, sir, Vladimir Putin, have a new peace plan for Gaza. Trump also has one. What is your Gaza peace plan, and what do you propose, sir?
Мы не предлагаем какого-то особого плана. Мы всегда исходили из того, что...
We don't offer any special plan. We have always believed that the only way to solve the Palestinian problem is by implementing the solutions adopted and considered by the United Nations over many years. And the most important one is establishing an independent Palestinian state. That is the key to resolving all issues.
Okay. The other important issue when you talk about Israel and Gaza that Anjana just did is the fact that the Arab world, when it comes to the issue of Gaza and people of Palestine, did not really do as much as your ally, your friend Iran did. How do you look at this entire scenario where this is a changed world order? We never thought that Iran would fight back for Palestinians more than the Arab world.
Вы знаете, каждый...
Each of these countries, in its way, is concerned about Palestine and the Palestinian people, worrying for them. And each of them tries to contribute in resolving the situation. Some things are obvious, others remain hidden in the shadows. But it doesn't mean that no one is doing anything. This is a complex issue that no one has managed to resolve over the years. Hence, it can't be fixed in just a few months by clicking a button. However, we should aim precisely at achieving this goal, establishing a Palestinian state. What has been done until now was done by President Trump. Naturally, primarily the return of Israeli hostages and Hamas took this step. I think, frankly speaking, this was the most important thing that was done as part of the latest steps for the settlement in Gaza. I believe it would be correct, perhaps, to think about the possibility of organizing the governance in such a way as to transfer all authority to the Palestinians. There are such options. They are being discussed both by Arab countries and the neighbors and beyond it. It's being discussed in the United States as well, I know it. As part of the United Nations, we have always taken part in this process. We will continue to do that with our friends.
Такие варианты есть, такие варианты обсуждаются и арабскими странами, и с соседями, и не только, и в Штатах обсуждается, я знаю. Ну, и мы в рамках Организации Объединенных Наций, мы всегда были участниками этого процесса и продолжим эту работу вместе с нашими друзьями.
Right. President Putin, we've discussed a lot of geopolitics. We'll stick to a bit of that in a while, but let's talk about your journey. You're a man from the intelligence community. How would you rate intelligence agencies today? Which one do you think is the best? I'm sure you'll say Russia, but I'm still saying, which one is the second best then? And how does CIA fare?
Well, there are several powerful intelligence services in the world. There is CIA and our Soviet and Russian intelligence. There is, as it is well known, a very efficient service Mossad, Israeli intelligence. Many countries of the world have tradition of intelligence services. You know, I think it's better not to give evaluation to the efficiency of other people's intelligence. I'm happy with the quality of work of our intelligence service.
Знаете, мне, наверное, лучше не давать оценок эффективности работы чужих разведок. Качеством работы своей я доволен.
Okay, fair. So we would like to, because this is a rare opportunity and we get to interact with you, we want to understand what shaped Vladimir Putin. And as we peep into your early years, we've read a little about your KGB days when you were working in Germany, and then you moved on to St. Petersburg and Moscow, where you worked with Mr. Yeltsin. What actually shaped the man you are today, the leader you are today? Which were the days?
My family, the family that I lived in and that I was born into. My parents, my closest people. I think that everyone is shaped primarily by our closest surroundings. Naturally, the social situation around, the colleagues, and, as you have fairly noted, that work in the intelligence service because it has strict discipline, strict ideology, and primarily has to do with the defense of the interests of motherland. And that was the entire point of the intelligence service of the Soviet Union, and I lived in that system for many years.
Связанная прежде всего с защитой интересов Родины. На это направлена вся работа была советской внешней разведки. И я жил в этой среде много-много лет.
I was watching one of your interviews where I think you were interacting with school children. And one of the children asked you, one girl there asked you, what has been the most shattering experience of your life? And you said, the disintegration of USSR. How did that affect you? And what is your vision of Russia?
It had an impact in the sense that we always need to very carefully look at our every step, and we need to understand the consequences of that. That's number one. Number two, it is very important not only for the former Soviet Union, but it applies also to Russia. What was the conclusion that I came to? It is that the Soviet Union, at a certain point of time, was in such a state that its leadership, and possibly even ordinary citizens, believed that it was so big, so great, that nothing, ever, under any circumstances would happen to it. And this idea of grandeur is the point when a country starts to make one mistake after another, thinking that everything is all right. Yes, we made a mistake here and was a small failure there, but we're so big that it will always pass, we'll survive. And the number of mistakes grows like a snowball, and is getting harder to manage that. I see the same as happening with some other countries today. Therefore, I'm keeping an eye.
А количество ошибок нарастает, как снежный ком, и потом с этим очень трудно справляться. Так же происходит, я смотрю, в некоторых других странах мира сегодня. Поэтому я внимательно...
Are you going to name them?
Нет.
Okay, but we go back to USSR, sir, because you talked about how one mistake was rolling into another. Who do you hold responsible for this situation? I mean, you're talking about people also who thought that probably it'll never happen with us. There'll never be any disintegration. But I'm sure you must have seen the Gorbachev years. You saw how Yeltsin went on. Whom do you hold responsible? What was the phase in which decisively USSR was disintegrating, breaking up?
Здесь я бы не стал сейчас искать виноватых, менее, более виноватых. В целом сложилась такая система.
I would not want to pinpoint the guilty and who is to blame more. In general, it was the system that turned out not to be viable. We need to recognize that and we need to think about it. We should not look for specific culprits, but we need to think how to create a system that will not simply protect itself, but develop. That's the point. And if such system is in place, it would be self-sufficient, autonomous, and effective.
Are you looking at reintegration then?
Интеграцию чего? Советского Союза?
Of the Soviet Union?
Нет, конечно, это просто исключено.
Reintegration of what? Of the Soviet Union?
Бессмысленно. Вы знаете, есть еще вопрос целесообразности.
No, of course not. That's simply not on the table. We do not have such a goal and it won't make any sense. There is also a question of rationality. It does not make sense in current circumstances because it would critically change the national and religious composition of the Russian Federation. It does not make sense.
You should tell that to some of the Western papers who keep writing about how you really want the old Soviet Union back, because that's what they keep doing.
Я не буду им говорить. Знаете почему? Потому что они все равно не хотят слушать то, что я говорю. Они хотят слушать.
I won't tell it to them. You know why? Because they still do not want to listen to what I'm saying. They want to listen to themselves only, or they want to comment on what I'm saying the way they like it.
Write a lot about saying that you want to build the empire back.
Да, они это делают для того, чтобы напугать свое население. Они злоупотребляют своим.
Yes, they do that in order to scare their population. They abuse their monopoly in the global media. It is called manipulation of the public opinion, and the goal is to justify their aggressive policy towards Russia. I don't see another goal.
Right.
Then if you're different, how would you, Vladimir Putin, summarize Vladimir Putin's life and ideology?
No, I think it is too early for me to summarize my life. I have some work ahead of me.
I like that, because we're going to talk about longevity. But before that, there's a very important question. You're going to India. The prime ministers of India have had a huge role to play in this strengthening of India-Russia ties. Who do you think, in your span of being a leader here in Russia, really made that difference since you were in power in enhancing India-Russia ties? Which are the prime ministers?
Well, you have already asked me to characterize other leaders of other countries. I do not think it is very polite. You know, now we're working with Prime Minister of India, His Excellency Narendra Modi. Indeed, we have very trustworthy and friendly relations. He is a very reliable person. In that sense, I'm speaking very sincerely. India got lucky. He lives India. I'm talking to him and I know him. I hope he won't be cross with me. I'm just saying what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking. It is very pleasant to me to talk to such a person of integrity, you know. And that's number one. Number two, indeed, he's very sincere when it goes about strengthening India-Russian ties across the whole range of areas, especially crucial issues of economy and defense and humanitarian cooperation, development of high-tech. It is very interesting to meet with him. He traveled here, and we sat with him at my residence, and we drank tea for the whole evening, and we discussed different topics. We simply had an interesting conversation, purely like humans. So I'm looking forward to this meeting. I'm sure it will be very interesting and useful.
Rather than not liking it, sir, I'm sure he has this mutual admiration for you as well. Quick question on the future, sir, because AI is a force to reckon with. Your viewpoint on that, do you think it is a force for chaos or it's a force for good? And where is Russia in this AI weapon war that's like in a prep situation world over?
Ну, вы знаете, это так же, как любые достижения прогресс это может быть и злом, это может
You know, like any other achievement of progress, it can be both good and evil. It is clear that it's cross-cutting technology that changes the life of an ordinary person, and of course, in the near future, it will change the lives of the whole humanity. Those who will be the first to master this technology, use it most effectively, would gain a tremendous benefit in the economy, in social sphere, in defense, as well as in every sphere, in education, in science, healthcare, everywhere, because the effective use of artificial intelligence in each of the spheres will have a multiplier effect for efficiency and productivity. There are also challenges here, and specialists know it fully well. The fact is that it is all based on the processing major data sets, big data. Here comes personal data of people as well. That's number one. And naturally, we need to take steps to guarantee safety and protection to ensure human rights in the widest sense of the word. But here is yet another very important thing. It is that the people who have these databases, in essence, they can use their capacities, the capacities of the developing technologies, to shape the worldview of people.
Предпринимать необходимые усилия для того, чтобы гарантировать безопасность, гарантировать права человека в самом широком смысле этого слова. Но есть еще одна очень важная вещь. Это те люди, которые обладают вот этими базами данных, они по сути через свои возможности, через возможности развивающихся вот этих технологий могут формировать по сути мировоззрение.
Yeah, because we're talking about the future.
But you're talking about health also, and you just spoke about health. So there was a hot mic moment between you and President Xi Jinping, and it was reported very widely when you spoke about longevity, the strides in medicine, biohacking. Do you think immortality is achievable?
Все конечно.
Everything has an end. Only God is eternal. We can extend longevity of life 100%. I'm sure we can. 77 years ago, average lifespan of a person in India was 31 years, and now it's about 70. That's what healthcare does. In India, infant mortality was cut fourfold. We congratulate you. These are all the results of the healthcare effort, and if you use AI in healthcare and you use it to produce medical drugs, for example, using genetic engineering and so on, that means it would have a tremendous effect. Nevertheless, everything comes to an end.
Используя там генную инженерию и так далее, вот то тогда, конечно, эффект будет просто колоссальный. Но все равно все конечно.
Not hinting at your age, sir, but there have recently been a lot of Gen Z protests across the world. How do you connect with the young generation? And we have a lot of leaders now who are looking younger and younger and younger. How does this happen? And how do you connect with the young people in Russia?
Знаете, здесь нет ничего нового. Ведь и у нас в литературе...
You know, there's nothing new here. In literature and in art, this topic of contradiction of the older generation and the younger generation, of fathers and sons in our classic literature, these images have always existed. Fathers and sons. There is nothing new here. You know what's new? The technology. Those messengers, telegram, and so on. They are used to influence the youth. The younger generation, this generation is more or less the same. Young people are always more mobile, more radical. The younger people, a young person, thinks that they are coming across this injustice and so on, and no one saw it before them. And now they saw it, and they will tell it to everyone around. And they think that these injustices are very easy to deal with. They can be easily solved. And when a person becomes more mature, he or she is trying to change something. It turns out that they start to understand that it's possible to find a solution, but it's not as easy as it seemed at first glance. Therefore, we need to talk with people. We can't just say that you're just young, you don't understand anything, you're just sitting there in your homes. It does not work like that. You need to always keep in touch with young people and to use their tools, their devices of obtaining information, to use feedback, social networks, and so on. You need to work there. And I'm sure that you partly do that. I'd like to wish you every success.
Совсем молодые, вы совсем ничего не понимаете, и вот сидите у себя дома там за стенкой. Так тоже нельзя. Нужно постоянно быть в контакте с молодыми людьми и пользоваться их инструментами, их аппаратом, пользоваться теми же современными средствами доведения информации до них, обратной связи в социальных сетях. Надо там работать. Но я так понимаю, что вы отчасти этим и занимаетесь. Хочу вам пожелать успеха.
President, sir, we could have gone on for another hour or so, but we're reaching the fag end of our interaction with you. You just mentioned religion a while ago and the Orthodox Church, a very important aspect. I've traveled to Moscow a few times now, and every time you come here during Christmas, it is unbelievably lit. It's unbelievable to see how beautiful Moscow as a city looks. Anjana's first time. So she was surprised. It's better than any European city. But religion does play a very important role now. How do you see spirituality when it comes to the morality question in leadership, the Russian society, and for you personally?
Ну, это основа. Мы все время, во всяком случае, последнее время, все время обращаемся к нашим традиционным, как мы говорим, ценностям.
Well, that's the foundation. We always turn to our traditional values, as we call them. At least that's what we have been doing lately. This does not mean that we use these traditional values to just sit idly. This is simply the foundation that we feel very solid on. But we need to look forward. Naturally, we need to develop and use all modern means of development. And only with that, using our basic fundamental values and vision of the future, that's the only way to efficiently achieve the goals that we are setting for ourselves. And that's the way we have shaped or formulated our goals, the goals of national development. I would really like our national goals and the goals of India, shaped by Government of India, headed by Prime Minister Modi, I would really hope that they coincide so we could join efforts and achieve maximum results.
Совпадали друг с другом, и чтобы мы, объединяя усилия, добивались максимального результата.
So we welcome you with open hearts to India, and we look forward to whatever comes out of the meetings. But I don't know how much of Hindi films or songs you've ever heard. There's an old song that was very popular in Russia, which actually just means that there's a red cap on the head.
You're wearing a red Russian hat.
Russian hat, but the heart is Indian. And it was very popular even in Russia. A lot of people knew about it. Anything that you want to say to about India, Indian society, Indian culture, and what is your message to all Indians who like you a lot and who would want to listen to what Mr. Putin has to say to Indians?
Вот вы сейчас сказали об индийской культуре.
You just mentioned the Indian culture and the Russian culture. You know, I think that we have a lot of citizens in the Russian Federation also having notion of Indian culture as about a fairy tale, a beautiful, bright, colorful fairy tale. From the time of the Soviet Union, people here like Indian movies and Indian music. I would even say that certain known people from Russian society have a cult of the Indian culture, and I like that very much, because I think that it is, as they say, from heart to heart. We'll be doing everything in our power so that this interest would not lose its spark. I would like people in India to know that.
Есть такой даже в известных слоях нашего общества культ индийской культуры. И мне это очень импонирует, мне очень нравится это, потому что это вот то, что называется от сердца к сердцу идет. И мы будем делать все для того, чтобы этот интерес этот не угасал. И хочу, чтобы в Индии об этом знали.
President Putin, we are very thankful to you for this very open interview that we had with you. And the best part, I think, Geeta, out of this entire interview is that we touched everything we talked about, everything. But this is a bond. The Indo-Russian bond is a friendship that is to be cherished forever. There are seasonal friendships, but there are friendships that last a lifetime. It is a classic vintage, and let's see what comes out of it. We're very thankful to you for this interview.
Well, that's Vladimir Putin for you, a no-holds-barred interview with Archduke and India Today Network, where he summed up what Russia is. He's saying Russia will not be isolated, will not compromise on her interests, and is not going to go kowtow to the developed world, saying we want to be part of any grouping such as the G8. Thank you so much for joining us. India and the world was watching you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
In view of the sanctions by the US, the arm-twisting methods that are being adopted, how do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Do you want to go back to being a part of the G8? Because that's a lot, there are a lot of reports on that. So is that something that Russia is looking at?
When you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
Complicated orchestration just as friends. We got together in one car and we spoke. Along the road, there was always something to talk about.
What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
Dear viewers, hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Archduke India Today, and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap, and we're at Kremlin today, and you're about to witness history, a very historic moment. It is said that when two old friends meet, they have their private jokes. They have a lot of banter, they have a lot of fun, and they have a bonhomie or camaraderie. But the others in the room might feel a little uncomfortable. And why do I say this? I say this because as the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi, the world will be watching very, very closely. Vladimir Putin is undoubtedly one of the most influential politicians of the world whose decisions don't just affect Russia, but numerous nations across the world. He's a very compelling and enigmatic figure on the world stage. It just doesn't get more exciting than this.
Well, that's right, Anjana. Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest-serving leaders. He's seen it all, through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Archduke. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
Well,
I hope you'll enjoy your stay in Russia.
Москва нравится, Кремль, где мы сейчас с вами работаем.
Hope that you like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we're currently collaborating together.
По плану, в целом мы довольны ситуацией.
As you see, everything is going on as planned. On the whole, we're satisfied with the current economic situation.
Потому что предстоит встреча, как вот
Most importantly, I'm delighted to be meeting, as you've mentioned, my friend Prime Minister Modi.
мы давно договаривались увидеться именно в Индии.
We have made a specific arrangement to do so in India because there are numerous topics on which we need to talk, and our collaboration with India spans an extensive array. And of course, the unique nature of our relationship adds another layer of significance.
Ну и хотел бы сказать, что и путь, который прошла Индия с момента завоевания.
I also want to highlight that India's progress over the past 77 years since gaining independence, an extremely brief span in historical terms, has been substantial indeed, and India has truly come a long way in development.
Скажу, ведь, знаете, когда мы живем в
I will discuss this further below. You know, as we go about our daily lives, we often fail to notice the changes happening right before our eyes. We scarcely ever take note of them. Yet, if you glance even slightly into the past and reflect on what has occurred in India, it's almost like a miracle. For example, few people recognize that life expectancy in India has nearly doubled during this period.
We will talk about longevity in some time from now.
Да, хорошо, поговорим обязательно, но во всяком случае...
We will definitely discuss that. Anyway, our relationship with India is advancing in numerous fields. It's a pleasure to meet Prime Minister Modi again, with whom we have both a professional and a personal, friendly relationship.
So, may I ask you, you just talked about the Indo-Russian ties, and it dates back to almost more than 7 decades. Dosti in Hindi and Druzhba in Russian. This friendship dates back to more than 7 decades. My question to you is, how do you assess the strength of this friendship in today's time? And what would you say about Prime Minister Narendra Modi and to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whom you call your dost?
О премьер-министре.
About the Prime Minister.
Yeah?
Ну, вы знаете,
You know, the world is evolving rapidly, and this pace keeps getting faster, which is plainly visible to all.
Вот это все видят очень хорошо.
The global configuration is changing, with new centers of power emerging, and the global power landscape is changing too. Therefore, it's crucial to ensure stability among major nations, since this forms the groundwork for gradual progress in both bilateral and international relations. In this context, our collaborative endeavors with Prime Minister Modi carry significant weight because they transcend our mutual ties. Given its direct relevance to both nations, ensuring stability in key areas of engagement is crucial, as it helps secure the fulfillment of our objectives. Prime Minister Modi sets very challenging tasks for the country, and for himself in the first place, then for the administration, and eventually for the nation. Take, for example, his famous pitch, "Make in India." It has a practical dimension, including for our bilateral relations. When we meet, he always says, "Let's do this, let's do that, let's look at this area and that." I can list them all. Therefore, we have a lot of practical areas of cooperation.
But before Geeta takes on to the next question, one little small, very interesting question, because when you met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in SCO, and there was this picture and video of you and him going in a car, and we're showing it to our viewers right now. You were traveling in a car with him. Was it pre-planned, or how did it go about? How did it happen? And what did you discuss in the car?
вы знаете, обсуждали текущие вопросы.
We have just gone over the current topics. This wasn't prearranged. We simply stepped out, and my car was waiting. I asked, "Would you like to come along?" That's all there's to it. A gesture of human solidarity, camaraderie, and friendship. No hidden scheme was involved. We climbed into the car like old friends and talked en route. We always have things to discuss. What's more, we continued our conversation and just remained in the car. Eventually, I suggested, "Let's go. They're already waiting for us." There's nothing special here. It simply indicates that we have matters to discuss, and those matters are very important to us.
Right. President Sir, the fact that you're going to go to India, you just said that both leaders are going to cement the guarantees that you give each other. What are the kind of announcements that we can expect? We've heard about technology transfer, we've heard about trade enhancement. What are the solid announcements during this visit? And I ask you this is because the world, and you know who I mean, would be watching.
The world would be watching our visit. There is no big deal here. India is an enormous country, home to 1.5 billion people, boasting a growing economy with a 7% annual growth rate, leading among major global powers. After all, Mr. Modi has made this possible. It's something both the Indian nation and Prime Minister Modi himself can rightfully claim as their achievement. Naturally, there will always be critics who think that improvements could have been more significant, but that's an achievement. We've laid out an ambitious plan for our collaboration in key domains. The most critical areas are indeed forward-looking. I'm referring specifically to high technology. Our partnership with India encompasses such fields as space exploration, energy, notably nuclear power, exemplified by the prominent Kudankulam nuclear power plant project, shipbuilding, and aviation. There are many interesting areas for cooperation that are looking to the future. Take, for example, artificial intelligence. We'll likely discuss it further down the line. AI represents a crucial technology shaping the future, rapidly transforming the world, amplifying possibilities exponentially while simultaneously presenting certain challenges. There are the matters we will discuss, choosing the ones that are the most significant for us, as both Prime Minister Modi and I believe. That's what we will focus on and what we will work on.
Any specific agreement, sir?
Well, of course. However, perhaps we shouldn't reveal them just yet. We will do that during the visit, when we can unveil everything publicly. Then our colleagues will first share with us all the documents they have prepared, and it would require our final approval.
We'll now come to the energy sector, yeah.
Okay, just talking about sustainability and trade. There's immense pressure on India and on Russia. When it comes to oil, India has suffered in terms of the kind of pressure that we're seeing from West. How can both countries handle this Western pressure and sanctions?
The issue here is that the pressure you have referred to typically involves employing political instruments to influence normal competition. Our energy cooperation with India remains unaffected by current conditions, fleeting political swings, or indeed the tragic events in Ukraine. Regarding hydrocarbons, well before the Ukrainian situation, our business entities had already built a solid and efficient commercial relationship that is based on mutual trust. It's widely known that one of our leading companies acquired an oil refinery in India. This investment represented one of the largest foreign inflows into the Indian economy, totaling more than $20 billion. Our company has been continuously expanding operations of this refinery, working with its partners, and operating successfully year after year. As a result, India has become one of the major refined product suppliers to Europe, not just because it buys our oil with a discount. It took years to achieve and is in no way connected to the current economic environment. Certain actors clearly dislike India's growing role in international markets owing to its ties with Russia. Consequently, they're seeking means to constrain India's influence for political reasons by imposing artificial obstacles.
Right. Right, President,
That's an important point to make, but my question to you now would be about defense. And India continues to be the biggest defense buyer. Roughly 38% of the market from Russia is bought by India. My question to you, sir, is in view of the sanctions by the US or the tariffs they have laid on India, the arm-twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Мне кажется, что и Индия, и весь мир увидели.
It appears that both India and the world recognize that India cannot continue to be treated the way it was treated 77 years ago. India is a major global player, not a British colony, and everyone must accept this reality. Furthermore, Prime Minister Modi is not someone who succumbs to pressure easily. The Indian people can certainly take pride in their leader. This is absolutely obvious. His stance is unwavering and straightforward without being confrontational. Our goal is not to provoke conflict. Rather, we aim to protect our lawful rights. India does the same. What are the obstacles? Obstacles in settlements. However, over 90% of our transactions are already conducted in national currencies. While some complications arise due to the presence of numerous intermediaries, there are also solutions. We can switch to the existing systems for exchanging electronic messages on financial transactions of the Bank of Russia and of our partners in India. These efforts are ongoing and advancing. Those who attempt to hinder economic ties with third countries ultimately encounter difficulties and suffer losses. I am confident that once this perspective becomes firmly established, such tactics of applying external pressure will fade away.
3 specific questions, sir. Number one, because during Operation Sindoor, the weapons we had acquired from Russia proved very crucial in our victory. And that is why I would like to ask you specifically about S-400, the air defense system, the 5 S-400s that are awaited by when can we expect that? The second question is on S-500, the more advanced air defense system. And the third question, 5th generation fighter jet, Su-57. How are you going to push for this and what's the update, sir?
Вы прямо эксперт.
You seem to be an expert on the issue, as if we're engaged in negotiations on military technical cooperation. If we delve into the substance, India stands out as one of our reliable and privileged partners in this area. We are not merely selling something to India, and India isn't merely buying something from us in the sphere of defense and security. No. It is a different level, a different quality of relations we have with India, and we value this. We see how India values this relationship too. Why? Allow me to emphasize again. We are not simply selling technology, we are sharing it, and it is a very rare thing to see in the sphere of military technical cooperation. It speaks to the level of trust between the two countries and the level of trust between the two peoples, I would put it this way. We have a broad portfolio indeed, including naval construction, rocket and missile engineering, and aircraft engineering. You have just mentioned the Su-57 aircraft. India operates several other Russian-made aircraft too. And there's the production of armored vehicles. India is manufacturing our renowned T-90 tanks. Trust me when I tell you that these tanks rank among the best in the world. Moreover, the famous BrahMos missile, a joint venture between Russia and India, is manufactured primarily at Indian facilities. Therefore, Prime Minister Modi's Make in India initiative should be implemented in this area as well. The Kalashnikov is certainly an important weapon, but we have been discussing high, one might even say cutting-edge technologies. Given the combat experience in using certain types of weapons, their value has multiplied manifold. Now, Indian military specialists, thanks to their strong ties with our military, understand clearly how and in what circumstances a particular weapon performs best, and where and when it should be deployed. This is an extremely important understanding, which is shared by both the Indian and Russian sides.
Right. President, sir, I have to go back to your oil question because you spoke about strategic autonomy, which is what India has been talking about. Strategic autonomy, decide for India's interests. But has India reduced Russian intake of oil after pressure from the West?
Вы знаете, у нас есть...
Well, there is a certain decline in overall trade turnover during the first 9 months of this year. This is just a minor adjustment.
В целом, торговый оборот у нас находится...
Overall, our trade turnover stands almost at the same level as before.
Сейчас не могу сказать вам точно по цифрам.
I can't give you exact monthly figures right now, but trade in petroleum products and crude oil, as well as the production of petroleum products for consumers of oil, Russian oil, is running smoothly in India.
Российской нефти в Индии идет абсолютно ритмично. Я знаю настроение российских.
I know the sentiment of Russian partners, of Russian companies.
Они считают, что их индийские...
They believe their Indian counterparts are reliable and very serious people.
Right. The other important aspect in terms of cooperation between India and Russia is the nuclear front. Russia has been one of the biggest movers when it comes to nuclear facilities in India. Are we looking at important announcements on the nuclear front? Nuclear today is a sensitive issue for Russia.
Есть. Есть.
Yes, of course we have some announcements to make. We are indeed one of the biggest movers, as you have noted.
Как вы сказали, мы не игроки, если по-серьезному говорить. Мы производители.
Speaking seriously, we're not movers. We are producers of the world's most advanced and reliable equipment for nuclear power plants.
Компания Росатом больше всех других компаний мира.
The Russian company Rosatom builds and operates more nuclear reactors for nuclear power plants abroad than any other company in the world. 22 nuclear units.
С вами известная станция, известная...
The well-known facility in our joint project, the Kudankulam plant, is one of the leaders in this regard.
Они эффективно работают и, повторяю...
These are large units. They operate efficiently and, I reiterate, have proven to be very useful.
Новости, о которых вы сейчас спросили. А что?
There are some announcements you have just asked about.
Новости заключаются
What
в
is
том,
it
что
about?
Россия единственная, наверное, сейчас страна.
The news is that Russia is probably the only country in the world today capable of building, and actually does build, small nuclear power plants.
Уже работают в России, причем
Such plants are already operational in Russia, and we can make them either floating or ground-based.
на земле. И это очень хороший вариант, который...
It's an excellent option for specific regions where big power stations are not needed or where connecting electricity grids between generators and end users isn't feasible.
от объектов генерации до потребителя. А можно в каких-то труднодоступных...
These compact nuclear power modules can thus be deployed in isolated and hard-to-access locations.
That's a lot of collaboration and cooperation. You're talking about made in India, make with Russia. How do you think President Trump's going to react to all of this?
Вы знаете, ни я,
You know, neither me nor Prime Minister Modi, despite certain external pressure we face, have ever, and I want to emphasize this, I want you to hear it, approached our collaboration to work against someone. President Trump has his own agenda, his own goals, whereas we focus on ours, not against anyone, but rather aimed at safeguarding our respective interests, India's and Russia's interests. In our dealings, we cause no harm to others, and I believe that leaders from other countries should appreciate this.
President sir, with regard to Mr. Donald Trump, my second question is also about him because recently he also went on to say that if you're buying oil from Russia, you're the one about India, you're the one who's funding the Russia-Ukraine war. How would you characterize Mr. Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America?
вы знаете, я никогда не даю...
You know, I never give character assessments about my colleagues,
Даже с тем,
neither those I've worked with in the past, nor current leaders of individual states.
отдельное государство. Это
These assessments should be made by citizens who vote for their leader during elections.
лидера в ходе избирательных.
As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note, and have already mentioned this publicly once, The United States itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants. That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States. If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it, including with President Trump.
But you're being very kind. You're saying you do not characterize Trump, but he certainly does to you. Having said that, he has weaponized tariffs, and he's weaponized it against India. Right now you're engaged, but it's a blow hot, blow cold for India. How do you think the two countries should be handling Donald Trump and the US administration?
Вы знаете, он проводит...
You know, he pursues his own policy, and he has advisors. His decisions aren't made out of thin air. He has advisors who believe that implementing such tariff policies, involving the imposition of additional duties on trade partners, ultimately benefits the US economy. He is acting in good faith, I presume. Our experts believe there are risks involved, but it is the choice of each country and its leadership to decide which economic policy to adopt. We have never engaged in such practices, do not do so now, and have no intention of doing so in the future. Our economy is open. We hope that, in the end, all violations of World Trade Organization regulations will be rectified.
Right. President Sir, things have changed a little between US and Russia. The fact that America is engaging you, we would have loved to be a fly on the wall when you were meeting with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. That was an important meeting. Were there red lines that Russia reiterated? What really happened?
It's premature to discuss that now. I doubt it would interest you to hear about it, as it lasted 5 hours. Frankly, even I grew wary of it. 5 hours is too much.
Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner.
Да, а я один, представляете, безобразие какое. Вот. Но если говорить серьезно, то она была очень полезной, потому что то, что нам привезли американские коллеги, было основано так или иначе на наших договоренностях до моей встречи с президентом Трампом на Аляске. Мы так или иначе говорили об этих вопросах на встрече в Анкоридже, но все-таки то, что нам привезли американцы сейчас, этого мы пока не видели, и поэтому нам пришлось пройтись практически по каждому пункту, поэтому и это заняло столько времени. Так что это была, ну, это нужная была беседа, абсолютно конкретная и обстоятельная.
Okay, can I ask this question this way, sir? Was there a certain specific point where you disagreed? Was there a specific point of disagreement where the versus one was just not going forward?
Да.
Yes, such issues were raised, we discussed them. But this is a complex task and a challenging mission that President Trump took upon himself. Fair enough, I say without irony, because achieving consensus among conflicting parties is no easy task. But President Trump, truly, I believe, he sincerely tries to do this. We went through each point again, let me reiterate this. Sometimes we said, yes, we can discuss this, but with that one we cannot agree. That was how the work proceeded. To say now what exactly doesn't suit us or where we could possibly agree seems premature, since it might disrupt the very mode of operation that President Trump is trying to establish. But that's what they do, shuttle diplomacy. They spoke with Ukrainian representatives, then with Europeans, came here, had another meeting with Ukrainians and Europeans.
Надо включаться в эту работу.
I think we should engage in this effort
you're saying
rather
that
than
28
obstruct it.
So you're saying the 28-point peace proposal is now not on the table, but there were leaked
Обсуждают.
conversations. It is?
Как раз они и обсуждают.
It is on the table.
It is.
Просто они разбили эти 28, потом 27 пунктов на 4 пакета и предложили обсуждать вот эти 4 пакета. Но по сути это те же самые 27
Yeah,
пунктов.
we'll go back to that and try and understand how it's going forward, sir. But what happened in Alaska? You met President Trump, and it was all about the peace deal, right? What happened? Did anything come out of it? Did you actually see a clear and sincere intent?
Да, да.
Yes, there was indeed a sense.
Даже не просто
No,
ощущение.
more than just a sense.
Сомнений нет, что...
I have absolutely no doubt that President Trump had genuine
Чем
intentions.
это вызвано? Не будем говорить о том,
We won't discuss here what caused them or why they appeared, but they're definitely present.
у Соединенных
Both the United States and President Trump likely have their own understanding of why this needs to be resolved quickly.
Штатов, почему это нужно закончить и как можно
Moreover, by the way,
В том числе,
on
кстати,
humanitarian
по
grounds too.
гуманитарным вопросам, я
I truly believe that is one of the motives behind President Trump's actions regarding this matter, because he constantly speaks about his wish to minimize losses, and I'm confident that his sincerity is genuine.
уверен искренне, что он
He undoubtedly considers these humanitarian concerns when formulating his decisions.
полагает,
However, other factors also come into play: political considerations and economic interests. Therefore, I believe that the US is actively seeking a solution to this problem.
на поиску этого решения.
Right, he has spoken about intentions. You're right about that. You know, he's claimed to have ended wars. He's been claiming, much to India's disappointment, that he brought about or brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And now he's looking at Russia, Ukraine, he's looking at Israel. Do you really think Trump is a peacemaker?
Ну, в случае, касающегося ситуации на Украине,
Regarding the situation in Ukraine, yes, let me repeat once again. I am absolutely certain, with no doubt at all, he sincerely aims for a peaceful resolution.
у Соединенных Штатов
Let me stress once again.
разные
The United States may have various reasons for this.
и гуманитарного характера лично для Трампа.
Humanitarian ones, personally for Trump, because he genuinely wants to end hostilities and prevent further loss of life. But there could also be political interests tied to ending the confrontation between Russia and Ukraine,
И экономические тоже. Кстати говоря, в сфере
or economic motives too. By the way, they can be in the energy area and in other areas.
на восстановление отношений экономического характера между
There are numerous areas where restoring economic relations between the US and Russia would benefit both sides. I showed you some letters, I won't go into this right now, large US companies sent to us.
американские компании.
We should remember this.
Не забывать о том, что они есть.
Really?
Oh.
Of course,
Конечно,
This-
о том, что они
about their
существуют,
existence.
они ждут, пока
They're waiting until all problems are solved and they are ready to return to us. They want this, asking us not to forget about them. The letters are there. What's so surprising about that?
Что здесь такого
Many want to return.
слышать?
So, of course, the Indian government is saying right. Why should we leave?
Конечно.
But
И
for
индийское
Trump to
правительство
make the
правильно
bidding-
говорит, нам зачем уходить, если...
But for Trump to make the bidding is what we were
For
stuck
Trump
at.
to make the bidding, to come with companies, letters from companies, that's a different ballgame altogether.
No, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We have letters from American companies, letters they have sent us, where they urge us not to forget about their existence. These are our former partners, who did not leave by choice. They express a clear desire to resume cooperation and are waiting, among other things, for a corresponding political signal.
This interview, this conversation is becoming very interesting, sir, because there are so many highlights of understanding it. It's really pleasant to see you and your sense of humor and how you're putting things forth. But now we'll go on to a very serious matter, and that is the Russia-Ukraine war. So what, in your view, would constitute a victory for Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war? What are the red lines? Because you have, and I quote you, you have said very clearly that Russia will lay down arms only if Kyiv's troops withdraw from territory claimed by Russia. Which parts would that be?
You know, it's not about victory, like you have said. The point is that Russia is determined, and will certainly do so, to protect its interests, protect its people living there, protect our traditional values, Russian language, and so on. Protection by the way of religion that has been cultivated on these lands for centuries. Yet you know that the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine is almost banned. They seize churches, drive people out of temples, and so on. It is a problem. And I'm not even mentioning the ban on the Russian language and so on. It is all part of a big set of issues. Let me remind you, we were not the ones to start this war. The West egged Ukraine on and supported the events orchestrating a coup d'etat. That was the point that triggered the events in Crimea, followed by developments in southeastern Ukraine, in Donbass. They don't even mention it. We've tried to resolve these issues peacefully for 8 years, signed the Minsk agreements, hoping that they could be resolved through peaceful means. But Western leaders openly admitted later that they never intended to honor those agreements, signing them merely to allow Ukraine to arm itself and continue fighting against us. After 8 years of relentless violence against our citizens of Donbass, something the West hasn't uttered a word about, we were forced to recognize these republics first, and secondly, provide support. Our special military operation isn't the start of a war, but rather an attempt to end one that the West ignited using Ukrainians nationalists. That's what is really happening right now. That's the crux of the problem. We will finish it when we achieve the goals set at the beginning of the special military operation, when we free these territories. That's all.
So what is that goal? What is the end game for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
I have said that already. Listen, we didn't recognize these self-proclaimed republics for 8 years. 8 years. They declared independence while we were trying to establish relations between the rest of Ukraine and those republics. But when we realized this wasn't possible, that they were simply being destroyed, we had no choice but to recognize them. And not just their existence on part of the territory, but within administrative boundaries established during Soviet times, then later under independent Ukraine after its independence, still within those administrative borders. And right away we told Ukraine, the Ukrainian troops, people don't want to live with you anymore. They voted in a referendum for independence. Withdraw your troops from there, and there won't be any military actions. No, they chose to fight instead. Now they have pretty much fought themselves into a corner. All this boils down to one thing. Either we take back these territories by force, or eventually Ukrainian troops withdraw and stop killing people there.
Just one last question, Geeta, before we move to the other one. Just one last question, sir. March 8, 2014, during the annexation of Crimea, you were addressing the Federation Council, and you said, Kyiv is the mother of all Russian cities. What did you mean?
Here I haven't made up anything. Historically, this is how it was said. Originally, the Russian state was formed from several centers. The first capital, according to history, was in Novgorod in the northwest. Later, the federal status moved to the city of Veliki Novgorod, and then it moved to Kyiv. This was ancient Rus, and since then, Kyiv has been known as the mother of all Russian cities.
И с тех пор Киев и называли мать городов русских.
Later, historical events unfolded in such a way that the ancient Russian state split into two parts. One part began developing with Moscow as its center, while another part fell under other countries. For instance, the part with Kiev, along with some other lands, these parts first formed a state with Lithuania, subsequently merged with Poland, forming the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Thus, this part of the ancient Russian state ended up in Poland, and by the 17th century, it sought to return back to Russia.
Right.
Gita.
President Sir, the fact that, you're mentioning the history, and it brings me to what I did when the conflict was underway. I had traveled to Donetsk, I traveled to Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and most of the people over there are Russian speaking. They speak Russian language. They were very disappointed with Kyiv that it was banned in eastern Ukraine. But they were also a little shocked that how is Putin doing this to us? We are his people. A lot of women I spoke to were in shock. So what do you have to say to people in eastern Ukraine who actually have families in Russia, who on a daily basis move from Ukraine to Russia? So what do you have to say to them?
The answer is quite straightforward. These individuals presumably resided in those parts of Ukraine, specifically in the areas of the Lugansk and Donetsk region, that remained under the control of the Kiev authorities at the time. Meanwhile, that part of the Lugansk or Donetsk region outside their control was being subjected to intense military action by the Kiev authorities. We were consequently forced to extend support to those areas that had declared independence. That is the first point. Secondly, we provided people with an opportunity to express their will in an open referendum. Those who believed it was in their interest to join Russia voted accordingly. Those who did not were free to leave unhindered for other parts of the Ukrainian state. We have never placed any obstacles in the way of that choice.
So what do you make of President Zelensky? He was promised NATO. The European Union promised him EU. Nothing really happened. Was NATO ever on the table for Ukraine?
When this gentleman came to power, he declared that he would pursue peace at all costs, using every means possible, without sparing even his career. But now we see things differently. He follows the same pattern as his predecessors, putting the interests of a narrow nationalist group, particularly radical nationalists, ahead of those of the people. Essentially, he is addressing their concerns rather than those of the nation. This regime's mindset truly resembles a neo-Nazi regime, because extreme nationalism and neo-Nazism are almost indistinguishable concepts. Today, undeniably, military action dominates their approach. However, they haven't achieved much success here either. I have already said before that what matters most for them is realizing that the best way to resolve the problems is through peaceful negotiations. And we attempted to negotiate with them back in 2022. What exactly they plan to do remains to be asked from them directly.
That'll be interesting to see what they have to say on that and how this peace process goes forward. But sir, you've always said that the eastward expansion of NATO is your real concern. Now, Ukraine hasn't got this NATO membership as of now. My question to you, sir, is NATO expansion the real threat or just a pretext for what you think is a part of Ukraine which is probably you want control over? Or you think that injustice is being done, Russian language is being banned? These were the real issues.
Listen, NATO is another matter altogether. The Russian language, Russian culture, religion, and even territorial issues, These are very important topics. One subject. NATO is something entirely different. We don't demand anything exclusive for ourselves here. First of all, there are general agreements that the security of one state cannot be guaranteed by undermining the security of others. This idea might seem somewhat obscure, but I'll explain it simply. Each country, including Ukraine, has the right to choose its own means of defense and ensure its own safety. Correct? Absolutely correct. Do we deny Ukraine this? No. But it's not acceptable if done at Russia's expense. Ukraine believes it would benefit from joining NATO. And we say, that threatens our security. Let's find a way to secure yours without threatening us. Secondly, we're not asking for anything unusual or unexpected, nothing falling from the sky. We're just insisting on fulfilling the promises already made to us. These weren't invented yesterday. They were pledged to Russia back in the 90s. No expansion eastward, this was stated publicly. Since then, several waves of expansion took place, culminating with Ukraine being drawn into NATO. This completely displeases us and poses a serious threat. Let's remember that NATO is a military-political alliance, and Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, establishing NATO, hasn't been repealed. It's a threat to us. Nobody bothers to take us seriously. Lastly, when Ukraine became independent, few people recall this, what was the first document ratifying independence? It was the Declaration of State Sovereignty, Independence of Ukraine. That forms the foundation of Ukrainian sovereignty and modern statehood. And it clearly states that Ukraine is a neutral state.
Was that also the basis for what happened when you decided to annex Crimea, your only warm water port, a very important strategic port for Russia, and then Russia was no longer part of G8. Today, the West claims or says that your actions in the recent past is the reason for, and I quote unquote, the isolation of Russia.
We didn't need to seize that important port in Crimea because it was ours already. Our navy had been stationed there under the agreement with Ukraine, which is a fact. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, our fleet remained there regardless. The matter isn't about that, though it's significant, but that's not what we're talking about here. And we did not annex Crimea. I want to emphasize this point. We simply came to help people who didn't want their lives or fate tied to those who staged a coup in Ukraine. They said, hey, nationalist extremists took over in Kiev. Did anyone ask us? Okay, we ended up as part of independent Ukraine after the dissolution of the USSR. So be it. History happened like that. Fine, okay. Now we'll live it that way. But we believe that we exist in the democratic state, and if coups happen here with unknown consequences, then we won't accept that. We don't want to live like that. There was a threat, not just of pressure, but of outright violence against the Crimeans. Russia stepped in to help them. How could we do otherwise? If someone believes differently, thinking that Russia would act differently, they're deeply mistaken. We'll always defend our interests and our people.
Right. Okay. Can I, Anjana, just ask one brief question before we move on to the other part? do you want to go back to being a part of the G8? Because that's a lot, there are a lot of reports on that. So is that something that Russia is looking at?
Нет.
No.
That's an interesting answer, sir. You're very clear about that.
Да.
Well, yes.
Дело вот в чем. Дело в том,
The thing
что
is,
я когда-то так случилось, я сейчас не буду вдаваться в
well,
детали.
I'm not going into detail, but I basically stopped going to these meetings back in the past.
Не очень понятно, почему
That's the first thing. Secondly,
входящие
I can hardly understand why countries of the G7
G7
call themselves G7, you know, in Russia it's called G like for great, big. The thing is, India's economy in purchasing power ranks third. And what about the UK or other countries in terms of purchasing parity capacity? I think it's 10th or something like that. I don't remember.
Конечно, это
But
все страны с
yes, these countries have a high-tech economy with a very solid foundation, which is still very much there, even though their share and the world economy is shrinking in round, inexorably. And the trend is there, and it's going to persist, apparently.
Совершенно, ну, так скажем, аккуратненько.
Well, let's put it mildly. I think this is going to happen due to the erroneous policy pursued by the authorities of many of these countries. Let's have a look at the recession in Germany. It's very much there for the third year in a row. France is in a very difficult spot right now on the brink of recession, and the same applies to other leading European economies. But that said, the G7 is still an important platform. They are working on something, discussing things, making some decisions. Good health to them and all the best. But, you know, at a certain point in time, I simply stopped going to these meetings, and it was not due to developments in Ukraine. These were due to other events, other developments. I'm not going to go into detail right now. And, you know, we informed our American counterparts on that. And
Sir,
You informed them in this meeting, during this meeting.
И на этой тоже.
Wow.
This meeting in particular.
with Mr. Witkoff.
Да, ну, затронули эту тему.
Yes, we mentioned this topic.
That's a very important aspect to it. But you have visited China.
Вы так думаете? Я не думаю,
Think?
что это так важно.
Well, I don't think that is that important, but if you think so.
Okay, sir. So coming back to, no, I just want to put it in perspective before we go ahead. So you're just telling us that in your recent meeting with Mr. Witkoff, it was offered to you that you could make it back to G8, and you categorically said that you are not interested.
Нет.
Okay, sir.
Нет, просто возникла эта тема.
No, this topic simply came up. You know, I had explained it to Mr. Witkoff why I had stopped visiting G8 meetings in the past. Well, there was no proposal. No proposal came, but we simply broached the subject, and I remembered that point in time when I stopped coming. That was back in 2012, after the presidential elections in the Russian Federation. Then I came at a certain point in time, and then I didn't. Well, it's a platform. Okay, very well, let it work further. But, you know, other big associations are coming up, like BRICS, the SCO, and the G20 is still active, and we are participating in all of these formats. We don't have any objections against all of that. But, you know, let's have a look at another aspect. What is the current state of affairs in relations between Russia and the EU? They're not normal. So imagine I go to the G8. How am I supposed to be talking to the members of the G8 if they don't want to talk to me? What am I supposed to do there? Well, we'll probably talk about that later.
Points you've just made. Number one, you're saying that countries like India, whose growth rate is far exceeding a lot of European countries, need to just calm down and understand how things are moving. The other thing you say is that organizations like probably G7 are losing their relevance, and what do I do there if they don't want to talk to me? But the third thing also you mentioned is BRICS. Now my question to you, sir, is there a new world order falling in place? Because you're not going to G7, but you just visited China and you're about to visit India. Russia, India, China, RIC, BRICS, SCO, Global South. What do you see as the new power center in the multipolar world?
Вы спросили, меняется ли мир?
You've asked whether the world is changing, whether a new world order is, in the stage of configuration. Well, the thing is, the world is constantly changing. Everything passes, everything changes, but right now the rate of these changes has skyrocketed, and we can feel that, we can see that. I mentioned that before. The thing is, we are witnessing global economic shifts and changes. They are not related to the developments in Ukraine or elsewhere where conflicts are happening. I think we can spend another hour speaking about that. It would give me great pleasure, but unfortunately, your audience, they're going to be bored with our deliberations on the subject. But the fact remains the fact. New centers of development, rapid development, strong development are happening. They are forming in the Global South in particular. I refer to South Asia. And not just India, but also Indonesia is on the ascendancy. I think it's almost 300 million people, not 1.5 billion as in India, but still this is a rapidly developing country. The same goes for Africa, which is developing rapidly, and this development is going to pick up because there are young people living there, and theirs is the future, and they will seek a higher standard of living. So this is inevitable. The rate of changes in the global economy is only going to grow further. Incidentally, we often hear that recently Russia is readjusting, recalibrating its ties with the Global South or with Asia. Well,
this picture that we wanted to show the President, because President, sir, this picture actually ruffled a lot of feathers across the world.
The Russia and the
Vladimir
China.
Putin, Xi Jinping, and Narendra Modi. 3 nation heads together. And people were going all over social media and America.
But even if we look at that picture, President Sir, how do you have these alternative blocs, and how can they become a real force if there are fundamental unresolved issues between key member states in that bloc?
the thing is, conflicts are always there, they're always present. There was not a point in time where there had been no conflict. Let's have a look at the background of major regions, major centers of the world. Whether you look at any point in history, you will see that there are always questions, always conflicts. The most important thing is how do you go about finding a solution to the conflict? How do you go about finding the most efficient method of addressing these challenges? Let's take BRICS and other large associations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And the thing is, within these organizations, we have a common understanding of what brings us together, and that is our values, traditional values, on the basis of which our civilizations have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And based upon these values handed over to us from previous generations, we're trying to advance and move forward, bringing our efforts together rather than trying to repress these opportunities. And when you pull efforts together, then the end result is based on synergy, and it turns out to be unprecedentedly good, unprecedentedly impressive. And this is what we are prioritizing within these associations and organizations. There was not a single time when we got together to find a way of trying to dupe someone or preventing someone's development. Our agenda is always of a positive nature. And I think this is important.
Okay, so that's an important answer, but are there alternatives? Because the biggest thing when you have these blocks is how do you make it economically viable? Are we looking at alternative payment systems? Is there going to be a BRICS currency? Or are we looking at alternative payments in terms of national currencies? Rupee ruble.
Moving towards de-dollarization, basically.
Вы знаете, никуда не надо спешить.
Well, there is no need for haste.
И тогда не будешь совершать
And
каких-то грубых ошибок.
if there is no hurry, then you will avoid many grave mistakes. Let's have a look at Europe. They created the euro system and they involved in that eurozone several countries that were economically unprepared for a single currency. Hence, problems with regulating a number of issues related to the social system. You cannot simply work with the national currency because there is one single currency, hence problems with the budget. We do not have this goal of building a single currency in BRICS at this stage and point. This has to be done very carefully, prudently.
Надо шире использовать возможности нового банка развития BRICS. Так, вот мы, например, предлагаем создать новую инвестиционную платформу с использованием электронных расчетов для того, чтобы, с минимальным капиталом, там, $100 миллиардов для начала, значит, но для того, чтобы создать условия для совместных инвестиций и в нашей экономике, и в экономике развивающегося глобального юга. И полагаю, что это может быть очень интересно, потому что это вложения, которые могут помогать и развитию стран, реципиентов этих инвестиций, и нам могли бы помогать, потому что мы бы вместе с этими странами производили бы хорошего уровня, качества продукцию по приемлемым ценам, что способствовало и развитию стран юга, и нашему развитию. И инструментов таких расчетов может быть все больше и больше. Современные средства электронные деньги, современные средства платежа электронные, они существуют и очень быстрыми темпами развиваются. И эта работа не против кого-то. Совсем нет. Это просто совершенствование тех инструментов, которые и так в мире существуют. Вот и все. Они же есть.
What is the roadblock? What is the roadblock in the rupee ruble payment here then?
Здесь нет препятствий. Это вопросы экономического характера. Мы прекрасно понимаем и отдаем себе отчет в том, что у нас есть определенный дисбаланс в торговле. Но, скажем, правительство Индии не вводит ограничения.
There are no obstacles here. These are purely economic issues. We fully understand and realize that we do have a certain trade imbalance. However, India's government does not impose restrictions on our mutual trade. Why? Because they need both oil and petroleum products. The Indian government needs to expand its purchases of Russian fertilizers because these are crucial for Indian farmers. And Prime Minister Modi constantly raises this issue. Please increase the volume of deliveries. The issue is entirely different. It's not about rupees, it's about what those rupees can buy, respectively, for our companies. We're also thinking about this, not only the Indian government, but we also do. And we agree that this disparity must be addressed, but not through bans, rather by finding areas beneficial for both sides. Therefore, during my visit and at our initiative, there will be an exhibition showcasing our importers from India. I want to share with you something completely candidly. This was my direct instruction to the government of Russia, which is to consider what else we could purchase from India. We're considering this matter together, including from the perspective of the Russian Federation.
Дополнительно могли бы закупать в Индии. Мы думаем над этим, причем с обеих сторон, в том числе и со стороны Российской Федерации.
That's an incredible move if it goes forward. My next question to you, sir, before we move to other issues, is how do you balance, I'm going to ask that directly, how do you balance India and China? Because it is very clear that you're keen on good relations with both these countries. How do you balance them? Seeing some tensions between us.
Нам об этом хорошо известно.
We know this very well. India and China are our closest friends. We treasure that relationship deeply, and I do not believe we have the right to interfere in your bilateral relations. But I know that both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping are committed to finding solutions to all issues, even to the most complex interstate problems. I know about it because both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping see that some specific tension is rising, and they both try to find solutions to these issues, exerting maximum effort. I know this well, and I can see it clearly. And the key reason why they would succeed would be their wisdom, which we appreciate immensely. At the same time, Russia does not feel entitled to intervene, because these are your bilateral affairs.
И мы этому очень рады, но не считаем себя вправе как-то туда вмешиваться. Это двусторонние отношения.
The next important issue with regard to India, sir, is terrorism. We faced two major terror attacks, one in Pahalgam and then one in Delhi. My question to you is that we see a dual ideology on terror in the world from different countries. What is the solution in your eyes? Because Russia has also faced terrorism. India faces it. What, in your eyes, is the solution to your terrorist, my freedom fighter ideology?
Все очень просто. Значит,
It's very simple. To achieve freedom, we must use lawful means only. Any actions involving criminal methods or those harming people cannot be supported. This has been decided long ago. As you have correctly noted, Russia has repeatedly faced acts of extreme terrorism throughout its recent history. In these matters, India is our full ally, and we completely support India's fight against terrorism.
жесточайших актов террора. И здесь с Индией мы полные союзники и целиком и полностью поддерживаем Индию в борьбе с терроризмом.
Right. Okay. But there's another country in the neighborhood, very important, important to Russia, important to India, Afghanistan. You are a very rare country to have recognized the Taliban regime. What made you really look at that as a strategic interest to recognize the Taliban at a time when the world is still saying they have not given equal rights to women, where there are still a lot of issues with Afghanistan actually coming to becoming a country that holds women and men equally, and there are many other human rights issues there.
In every country there are enough problems, and Afghanistan is not an exception, considering that for decades this country has been embroiled in a civil war. It's just horrible. But the Taliban clearly controls the situation in Afghanistan, and this is evident. Here's what needs to be said first, and you have to accept it because it's reality. Secondly, what's important to note is that the Afghan government takes many actions to combat terrorism and various terrorist organizations, including ISIL and others like them. This we also know very well. Afghan authorities have significantly reduced opium production in their country and are actively addressing drug threats from within its borders. There are several other important issues here. The main point is that in order to influence events happening in the country, you must stay in contact with the current leadership there. Exactly what we are doing.
предпринимает активные шаги по сокращению наркоугрозы с территории Афганистана. Есть и некоторые другие обстоятельства. И главное из них заключается в том, что для того, чтобы как-то влиять на происходящий процесс, нужно быть в контакте, нужно работать. Чем мы и занимаемся.
There's another flashpoint.
The foreign minister of Afghanistan was in India. I'm just sharing a snippet. He was in India, and we weren't allowed. Women weren't allowed to attend the press conference, and we fought back. And then he had to hold a press conference with women as part of that entire delegation. Isn't that interesting? I was just sharing it with you.
Да.
There is truth in what you say, but on the other hand, if he hadn't come here, you wouldn't have had any chance to influence these events at all. And now you've got both connections and the minister who has arrived. You were able to express your reaction to what happened. How do we measure whether that's little or much? It seems to me that at least this is the part of your influence and your partner's influence on the situation. But imagine there were no contacts at all. Then what? Everything remains exactly as before, and nobody, including yourself, would influence anything or express any opinion about this. In contrast, now such an opportunity is available to you. Contacts are better than no contacts at all.
Pushing for change is equally important, as you make a very valid point. The other flashpoint is Gaza. And it is now being known that you, sir, Vladimir Putin, have a new peace plan for Gaza. Trump also has one. What is your Gaza peace plan, and what do you propose, sir?
Мы не предлагаем какого-то особого плана. Мы всегда исходили из того, что...
We don't offer any special plan. We have always believed that the only way to solve the Palestinian problem is by implementing the solutions adopted and considered by the United Nations over many years. And the most important one is establishing an independent Palestinian state. That is the key to resolving all issues.
Okay. The other important issue when you talk about Israel and Gaza that Anjana just did is the fact that the Arab world, when it comes to the issue of Gaza and people of Palestine, did not really do as much as your ally, your friend Iran did. How do you look at this entire scenario where this is a changed world order? We never thought that Iran would fight back for Palestinians more than the Arab world.
Вы знаете, каждый...
Each of these countries, in its way, is concerned about Palestine and the Palestinian people, worrying for them. And each of them tries to contribute in resolving the situation. Some things are obvious, others remain hidden in the shadows. But it doesn't mean that no one is doing anything. This is a complex issue that no one has managed to resolve over the years. Hence, it can't be fixed in just a few months by clicking a button. However, we should aim precisely at achieving this goal, establishing a Palestinian state. What has been done until now was done by President Trump. Naturally, primarily the return of Israeli hostages and Hamas took this step. I think, frankly speaking, this was the most important thing that was done as part of the latest steps for the settlement in Gaza. I believe it would be correct, perhaps, to think about the possibility of organizing the governance in such a way as to transfer all authority to the Palestinians. There are such options. They are being discussed both by Arab countries and the neighbors and beyond it. It's being discussed in the United States as well, I know it. As part of the United Nations, we have always taken part in this process. We will continue to do that with our friends.
Такие варианты есть, такие варианты обсуждаются и арабскими странами, и с соседями, и не только, и в Штатах обсуждается, я знаю. Ну, и мы в рамках Организации Объединенных Наций, мы всегда были участниками этого процесса и продолжим эту работу вместе с нашими друзьями.
Right. President Putin, we've discussed a lot of geopolitics. We'll stick to a bit of that in a while, but let's talk about your journey. You're a man from the intelligence community. How would you rate intelligence agencies today? Which one do you think is the best? I'm sure you'll say Russia, but I'm still saying, which one is the second best then? And how does CIA fare?
Есть несколько таких мощных.
Well, there are several powerful intelligence services in the world. There is CIA and our Soviet and Russian intelligence. There is, as it is well known, a very efficient service Mossad, Israeli intelligence. Many countries of the world have tradition of intelligence services. You know, I think it's better not to give evaluation to the efficiency of other people's intelligence. I'm happy with the quality of work of our intelligence service.
Знаете, мне, наверное, лучше не давать оценок эффективности работы чужих